So, welcome back to SLYFOX Collective. I'm your host Jamie, and you are?
I'm Ryan Dean.
And I'm Nathan Reedman.
You're listening to SkyFox Collective. So, looks like you're the first one asking the first questions, Nathan. So, shoot.
So, Jamie, what's your opinion on loot boxes in the gaming industry?
I think loot boxes are quite a contentious kind of hot topic. But the problem is they get overused a lot. So the fact is that a lot of them tend to get pushed by companies in order to get kids gambling or to spend that on their mom's credit cards. It's kind of a bit of a touchy subject.
No, yeah, I agree.
What are the three things that make a good video game, Jamie and Nathan?
I'll go first. I think the first thing is plot-wise, you gotta have a good plot, otherwise, there's no background scenery to the game. Second thing is, most importantly, in my opinion, is just the gameplay overall. You gotta have a decent, game system. It's gotta run properly. It's gotta have good FPS, good sort of frame rate, good controls. It can't be any of those. And the third thing is, well, having a good sort of overall development cycle. Like if you're going to rush your employees, it's not going to end up very well. Whereas if you take your time, research, develop it over a period of years, people don't mind waiting for that. They like that more than say just rushing it out.
No, I completely agree. I think narrative is very important when it comes to games more now, because you've got games such as Red Dead Redemption 2 that can hook you on from the very beginning because of the kind of the relationship between the characters. And like Jamie said, also, it's very important to have a good narrative. But I also think things like gaming mechanics, the way the game works, it needs to be easy to use, but also unique to other games. I think it's important to make sure that you're not just copying every other game. But what do you think, Ryan?
I think, and the animation and the graphic is another thing that helps game. Is another key aspect of the game, because without that, gamers won't be interested in it. And if you take your time with the animation and graphic, it'll pay off. Because games like Legends of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, you can tell that was taken in great detail and took a long time. While it didn't feel rushed compared to the older games.
Yeah, exactly. That's basically what I was thinking. So on to the third question, Ryan. Do you think there should be LGBTQIA+ individuals / characters in the game, and is it important?
I think it is important, Jamie, because it gives representation for all people, and with equality and inclusion and equality is important, and many games should promote that, because it's for all outsiders and it can break their shell as well.
Kind of like barriers and that.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, go on.
Well, what I mean is it shouldn't sort of infiltrate the game per se and sort of just, put a gay person as a character just because there's a gay person. It should have some sort of aspect to the lore. Kind of like how The Last of Us did it. They just sort of shoved it down people's throats, and not many people like that.
I mean, like kind of bounce off literally what Jamie just said. The idea of not necessarily just making the character part of the LGBT community, so they're there, but with the idea of giving the player the opportunity to kind of choose their sexuality. I mean, there's games, such as like things like Life is Strange and The Walking Dead, which let the player decide whether your character is part of that community or not.
Not just that, but it should be very subtle, not forced, because it feels out of place, and it may have a mixed response from the audience as well, and it can be it can probably have many threats to people who are gay in real life because of what that game did, because it was very forced upon. Nathan, do you agree that some games should show historical events?
I mean, I think of recent times, history has become quite popular within the narrative of games. I think starting back in 2006, 2007, when Assassin's Creed first released, and it kind of introduced the aspect of visiting these places that almost seem impossible without the idea of time travel. But then, unfortunately, now games have decided to take historical places and manipulate them in a way that kind of creates false history. But there is a way that the recent Assassin's Creed games have kind of used it to go into education. You have the discovery tours, which allow kids of either learning history to almost enter this historical world and learn real history that happened there.
Do you think another example is kind of like World War II games removing either the swastika or symbols of the SS or other groups?
Call of Duty is an example.
Yeah, like Vanguard and that, the most recent game.
I mean, definitely. I think the issue with this is it's seen as very controversial to include the Nazis as like necessarily this power they were, but it's also history, and it's something we can't really erase. And I think sometimes the idea of cancel culture within video games is sometimes can cause games to maybe become less developed as they should be.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because as someone who's partly Jewish and had family on in the war that ended up in, camps like that. I think it should be shown because it's an important piece of history that, if we don't learn from it, it's going to happen again eventually.
I agree.
Not just that, but a certain war game called Wolfenstein that had a very strong backlash in Germany because of the resemblance to the Nazi regime back in World War II. So some countries had mixed response on war games because of their arsonity. Don't you agree?
Yeah, I agree. So, Ryan, do you think there should be a limit within violence in video games?
I think there should be a violence, Nathan, because war, domestic violence, and glamorized violence, you don't want to overdo it so much because it can promote a lot of kids to actually do these acts in real life, and can probably bring a lot of paranoia to them, and it can probably make them mistrusted to many other people.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, the idea of violence in games is it's something that's kind of depending on the time that you do it, because you've got games like Mortal Kombat, which are one of the most violent games I think of, which get away with it because that's their style. Yeah. That's their DNA. When you got games such as let's talk about Call of Duty, for example, it was never a hyper realistic violent game, was it?
No, it was just an arcade shooter, really.
But now you have the ability to shoot people's arms off with luck, which necessarily is something that didn't need to be there.
But it's still there for gameplay's sake.
Yeah.
Or Doom or any shooter game, they do it for they're being realistic. It's very realistic. But games like Mortal Kombat stuff, we all know it can never happen because it's very fictional.
It's all fictional.
But some shooter games can happen. Jamie, do you think this little infiltration has happened to many games?
Yeah, I think this is kind of the main problem with a lot of different games nowadays because, for example, games like The Last of Us, there was a lot of politics behind that game, particularly with individuals in the developing team such as Neil Druckmann and Anita Sarkeesian. Anita Sarkeesian being quite a popular feminist / left-wing kind of political person who likes to sort of infect video games with her sort of woke agenda, you'd say. And the problem with this is people don't want politics in their games, People don't like having politics in their games because it just ruins the story and it adds things from the real world that don't need to be in there. And you can see this in the sales. I mean, goddamn, look at what's happened now. The Last of Us, was a good franchise a year ago, and now it's dropped to the bottom of the lists. And then you have things like Call of Duty, which kind of links back to what Nathan said a while ago. It's kind of being eroded, because of political infiltration of games. You can't even have a swastika, and you can't have the basic characters such as, I don't know, the Germans and the British. Now it's replaced with some sort of mishmash of both, and displaying people in certain aspects of the game, like a black British paratrooper, which was a real person in the British Army, but you can't then filter that out for the entire army. Or, for example, Battlefield 5, where you could literally play as a black Nazi. I mean, that doesn't make any sense. It just doesn't.
I think Jamie has a good point there when comparing things like The Last of Us, because when the first game came out, it was just phenomenal.
Yeah, it was great.
It was this game that everyone was talking about, and the sequel was, everyone was excited for the sequel, including myself. It was the sequel to this great game, but the idea that they kind of played all this political stuff into it, people didn't like, because people don't play games to kind of for hyper-realism, they play it for escapism.
Yeah, exactly.
Because we're never going to face a zombie apocalypse in real life, and we're never going to be the characters of Joel and Ellie. So the idea of stepping into their shoes is something that is what people look for, not the idea of political points of view in the game.
In other words, Jamie and Nathan, it's more imaginative and it's not supposed to be. It's for fun, really, not to be for real and just to think a lot, just to put your mind away or something.
Yeah.
I'm Ryan Dean. This is Nathan Reedman.
Hiya.
So, Nathan, what do you think about the political infiltration on games?
I think political point of view is something that's quite big right now. However, the idea that they're kind of taking over video games it's kind of bad, because people use video games as a way to escape the real world. But you've got games such as the recent Tony Hawk game dealt with COVID and kind of showed you that you had to wear masks and there was billboards, and people don't want that because the new Tony Hawk game was a remake of the original one. People want to remake their childhood.
Plus, The Last of Us the sequel for The Last of Us had a political infiltration in it, and it did mess up the game's gameplay and narrative. Don't you agree?
Absolutely, because the first game was amazing and everyone loved the first game. But I think because the second game, they kind of tried to make it more suitable for the modern era, because cancel culture has become a big thing recently. So I think that they kind of tried to force it in a way that everyone would like it. But the thing about games, not everyone's going to like your game. So I think the idea that they should have probably just stick to the formula they had.
And the underage gamers will probably be more confused as well.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, definitely.
Nathan, what are your thoughts on the unequal pay within the gaming industry? Do you think it's changing or getting worse?
Well, I hope it's changing. As we know from last year, there was the big exploit where Blizzard actually revealed that they were underpaying their female workers compared to their male workers, even though both of them had been working as hard in the game that they were we're working on.
It shows that there needs to be change in the modern era, but it's slowly changing for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it is slowly changing, but I think we need to find a way for it to change quicker and become more open for people to kind of talk about the fact that they're not being paid as much as they think they should be.
What features should never be included in a game?
I think the idea of racism being put in a positive light, the idea that you got games like Grand Theft Auto, which kind of show you the idea that it was kind of cool to be racist and these little jokes. And as much as that game has got praise for being one of the greatest games of its time, it definitely does put things such as terrorism and racism into a positive light, which is something we should probably focus less on.
Plus, you don't want to make racism acceptable in society because, God forbid, it's already gone too out of hand right now.
Well, yeah, especially with recent events, the whole idea of Black Lives Matter, racism should be something that we something we don't publicise as being this positive thing that you're allowed to be racist, because everyone has emotions, and just because someone acts as though they don't care, it really affects someone.
Indeed. I think other features should never be included is probably discrimination and also mocking people's disabilities or mental health as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think
because I think if you do mock that, because even though it's not noticeable mental health, it is actually to them internally. They're in pain all the time, and if they make it so very hidden that it's unnoticed by everyone, but it should be probably be more aware and don't be mocking.
I think again, going back to Grand Theft Auto, that game I recently replayed through that game, and there's a lot of jokes of people with autism and people with disabilities, and that idea that it's kind of something you make fun of, and it's not something you make fun of. I have people that I know with autism, and it's a sensitive topic, and you don't want to kind of put them in a bracket where they think, oh, they're different than everyone else.
Exactly. You don't want to differentiate people into other genres now.
Yeah.
Also, that we have interviewed a few people as part of our podcast to see on the gaming topics whether games are good or bad, and we'll inform you next time.
Hope you enjoy. Bye.
We'd like to thank our special guest star George Davis for helping us with this project. Thank you, George.
Thank you, George.
Thank you for listening, and add your comments wherever you access our podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. Bye for now. See you next time. Do you think gaming addiction is a problem?
100%.
Could you elaborate?
I think people become too involved in games and then their whole life revolves around them and they don't get the social interaction they need.
What are the three main things that make a good video game?
Fighting, talking to other people online, and that's a hard one. Graphics.
What is your favorite video game and why?
Call of Duty, because you can talk to people online through the game.
What is your thought on the metaverse, in other words, virtual reality?
I think it's sick. I think it's cool. I don't know how to elaborate on that.
Do you think gaming addiction is a problem?
It can become one if you become too involved in a specific game.
So it can cause mental problems in your life.
Yeah, people get too attached to a game and they bring it into reality when they should just stay as a video game.
Do you think girls are more mainstream than stereotypical boys? In other words, originally video games were for boys, and now girls are becoming more into games now.
It definitely used to be more for guys. It's now more universal and more inclusive for everybody.
What are the three main things that make a good video game?
Definitely storyline, a good character base, and maybe having the ability to do a free roam so that you can take the game into however you see it.
What is your favorite video game and why?
I haven't actually got one, but if I was to pick one, it might be something like the new one, Rainbow Six Siege Extraction. The graphics on that is quite good, and it's got a good storyline.
What is your thought on virtual reality?
I think virtual reality is a good concept for now. It's just not quite to its fullest potential. It can definitely be taken much further.
Gaming addiction is a problem.
No.
How would you elaborate on it?
I don't know. It can be like a de-stress. Like I play games to de-stress. It's like my comfort thing, so I wouldn't count it as an addiction. I think it can be if you go so far, but I don't think it is all the time.
Do you think girls are more mainstream than stereotypical boys? In other words, boys play video games more and girls hardly played any games at the beginning.
That's how it used to be. I think nowadays it's definitely more of a 50-50 split.
What are the three main things that make a good video game?
Backstory, characters.
What is your favorite video game and why?
Oh, Red Dead Redemption 2, just because it hit me hard.
What is your thoughts on the metaverse? In other words, virtual reality.
It's alright. It's not personally my thing, but it's definitely, if I like it, then if it's that kind of thing to play, it should be good.